Okay, so we're going to go through this trace of this insertion sort where it's working on this array. Starts off being called ARR, but then when it gets sent to the parameter elements, now elements is pointing to this array, and it's filled with the values 4, 12, 4, 7, 19, and 6. So I recommend when you have to trace through, the question is how many times will line 10 be executed when this sort is used on this array. I recommend that you kind of jot down on paper. I know it doesn't look like I'm jotting on paper, but I did this first on paper and then I couldn't find a good way to videotape that. So I am doing it through Jamboard, and I'm going to try to talk through it. It will take me a little longer to talk through it than it would for you to think through it and just jot down things on paper, but it's really important to keep track of all the values of the variables to figure out what's going on. So when I look at the for loop is basically going from j gets 1 to less than elements.length. Elements.length is actually not 5, it's 6 elements. So j is going to go from 1 to 5. So I've laid out the values of j that will execute the outer for loop. Then I'm going to start just tracing through. When j equals 1, the temp variable is going to take on whatever is at elements at index 1. So that would be 12. Okay. Then possible index is going to take on the value of j, which is 1. Now I have to think about the while loop and its two conditions. Is possible index greater than 0? Yes. But also, because of the and, we have to make sure that temp is less than the element at the previous index. Possible index minus 1. I've written possible index here, PI, just to save some time. But when the possible index 1, look prior to that, minus 1, 0. So temp is 12, while 12 is less than 4. That's not true. So this first loop, this first value of j equals 1, the while loop is never going to execute. Therefore, line 10 is not going to have any execution. So I'm going to put a 0 in that spot there, just keeping track of how many times line 10 executes. And I'm actually going to show you what's happening in the rest of it as well. So when j is 2, go back to the beginning of the for loop. We're looking at temp gets elements at index 2, which is 4. So then possible index is 2. Elements, now we have to evaluate the while loop conditions. Possible index is greater than 0, but we also have to check whether 4 is less than the item at index 1. So is 4 less than 12? Yes. Therefore, both of the while loop conditions are true, and we will go into the loop body, and we will basically replace, when the first line in there, line 9, will take the element from item 1 and store it, copy it into the current possible index, which is 2. So 4 is going to get replaced with 12. Okay. Then possible index will be decremented to 1. So there we go. We executed line 10 once there. Now we're going to go to the top of the for loop again. And, oh no, I'm sorry. We're still looking at the while loop. The while loop we now have to check, is possible index greater than 0? Yes, it is. But is temp 4 less than the index, the element at index 0? Is 4 less than 4? No. So we are not going to execute the while loop body a second time. We're going to go straight out of that to the element's possible index gets temp. So we're going to put temp into possible index, which is 1. So the 4 is going to move there. Essentially, we just moved the 12 back and made space to put the 4 where it belongs. That's the insertion sort concept. Okay, now possible index gets decremented to 0, and we are done executing the while loop completely. So go back to the top of the for loop. J is now 3. Temp gets 7, the value at index 3. Possible index gets 3. Then while possible index is greater than 0, that's true, By the way, that means this while loop has a potential to execute for 3, 2, and 1 because it keeps decrementing possible index. So it could run this loop 3 times, but we'll see. It also has to satisfy that temp is less than elements at index 2 on this run. So is 7 less than 12? Yes. So we are going into the while loop condition, and we're going to then make the move of the 12 up to where the 7 is. So the 7 is going to get replaced with 12. And then we're going to decrement possible index. So now that's going to become 2. And then we're going to check the while loop condition again. The beginning is correct. 2 is greater than 0. So, but is temp less than the index at the element at index 2 minus 1? So is 7 less than 4? No, it is not. So we're not executing the body of the while loop a second time. We're going to skip those 2 lines of code, so we do not execute line 10. And we did execute it once before, but we're not executing it again. But now we're going to basically put the 7 back where it belongs, which is at index 2. Okay. Then we're done with the j equals 3 case. Now we're moving to j equals 4 case. When j equals 4, temp gets element at index 4, that's 19. Possible index is 4. The next line, the while loop, possible index is greater than 0. Question, is temp less than the element at the previous index? Is 19 less than 12? No, so it's going to skip over and never execute line 10, not even the first try. It is going to take the 19 and place it right back where it was. That's what this line, the last line does. Temp goes into elements at index 4. So that particular value of j, really nothing happens except 19 is temporarily stored in temp, and then it's put back into the array exactly the same spot it was, copied back in. And finally, when j is 5, temp gets 6. Possible index is 5. That's greater than 0, so I'm now evaluating the while loop condition. Temp is less than, is 6 less than 19? Yes, it is, so we are going into the while loop. We are going to execute the line 10 count. And what are we going to do there? 2 things. We're going to move the 19 back to replace the 6, and then we're going to decrement possible index. Okay, and basically every time we compare the 6 to the previous, the 6 that's in temp to the previous element, we're going to move it back if 6 is smaller. So we're going to essentially move the 12 back to here. That's going to be another count of the loop. And then we're going to move the 7 back to here. That's going to be another count of the loop. And the 6 is going to go in the slot for index 2. Now, I know I made a mess of the index, but hopefully you were watching along as what I was doing. And you see that the important part is we have our answer. The 6 had to move 1, 2, 3 spots, and every one of those moves counts as executing line 10. So we end up with 5 executions of line 10. Okay, I hope this helped you a little bit to see the kinds of thought process as I would go through to evaluate a question like this. It definitely goes faster in your own mind as you're jotting things down on paper. So I highly recommend you have scratch paper when you take the exam, and you just be jotting stuff down as you think about it. And it goes much faster than when I try to explain it like this in a video. But hopefully you're doing well studying, and I wish you the best with the rest of your studies.